Let's jump right into this explainer. We are looking at a massive, stunning stretch of coastline, running from the tip of the Alaska Panhandle down through British Columbia, Washington State, Oregon, and all the way into Northern California. And today, we're diving deep into the history, the culture, and really the absolute environmental mastery of the Indigenous peoples who have called this incredible region home since time immemorial.
Now, here is the big mystery we're tackling today. When European explorers first showed up, they found some of the most densely populated indigenous communities ever recorded in this part of the world. But how? I mean, how in the world do you support massive permanent towns without the typical plow-based agriculture we usually associate with huge populations?
To figure that out, we've got a roadmap. We'll start with the Salish people, move on to masters of the environment, explore their complex societies and kinship, look at the Potlatch and art, and finish up with colonization and resilience.
All right, Section 1. The Salmon people, a culture built on the Pacific salmon.
For these native nations, the sea wasn't just a resource. It was literally everything. They rightfully defined themselves as the salmon people. Imagine trying to survive a long, freezing coastal winter, relying almost entirely on dried and smoked fish stores. Because of that harsh reality, when spring finally broke, that very first fresh salmon wasn't just a meal. It was survival. It was renewal. And they welcomed it with incredible spiritual reverence and massive ceremonies.
And they were absolutely ingenious about how they caught them. They didn't just have one trick up their sleeve. They used hook and line, small nets, these wildly intricate traps and baskets, spears, lures, the whole shebang. And after pulling them from the water, they'd often pierce the fish with cedar skewers and roast or smoke them right over open pit fires. It was this absolute mastery of so many different harvesting techniques that kept these communities so incredibly prosperous.
Moving right along to Section 2, Masters of the Environment, and how they were engineering the forest.
So for a long time, anthropologists slapped the label hunter-gatherer on these societies, basically implying they just wandered around picking up whatever nature randomly provided. Well, modern research totally debunks that. Take the comets bulb. It's a member of the asparagus family and was a huge staple in their diet. They didn't just stumble upon it in the woods. They actively cultivated it. Specific families and kin groups actually acted as stewards, carefully managing their own designated patches.
It was literally farming, just in a different way. They used specialized hardwood digging sticks to break up compacted earth. They systematically cleared the land, tilled the soil, weeded out competing plants, and intentionally planted bulbs. By loosening the soil like this, the roots could grow freely and be harvested whole. The entire process was totally engineered to maximize the yield.
And it wasn't just root vegetables. They essentially created these massive, complex forest gardens. We're talking crab apples, hazelnuts, cranberries, wild plums, wild cherries. They actively managed the ecosystem using controlled burns, pruning, fertilizing. They actually created and maintained habitats to sustain this unbelievable biodiversity. They made sure the forest provided abundantly for generations.
Okay, Section 3, Complex Societies in Kinship, Structure and Scale. Because they had such abundant food, they had the time and the numbers to build really complex, highly structured societies. But the social rules varied wildly depending on where you were. Up north, groups like the Tlingit, the Haida, and the Tsimshian were strictly matrilineal, meaning your lineage, your property, and your social standing came entirely from your mother's side. The Tsimshian, for example, had clans split into two halves, eagle and raven on one side, killer whale and wolf on the other. And you absolutely had to marry outside your half group. But if you head further south to groups like the Belakula, you'd find patrilineal systems instead.
Now, we also have to understand that these weren't simple everybody is equal communes. They were deeply stratified. They were strict social classes. And objectively speaking, warfare and long-distance raids were a harsh reality of life before European contact. The Haida, for example, were known to paddle all the way down to California on raids. And this warfare created a hereditary class of captives. Slavery was a widespread institution, with enslaved people sometimes making up anywhere from 1 to 30% of a given village. To really wrap your head around how enduring and massive these civilizations are, just think about this number, 15,000. Places like Solillo Falls on the Columbia River weren't just temporary campsites. This specific spot was a massive trade hub and a crucial fishery that was continuously inhabited, literally buzzing with life and commerce for an astonishing 15,000 years. Which brings us to Section 4, the Potlatch and Art, Displays of Wealth and Power.
If you were a wealthy, powerful chief in this society, how did you show it? Through the potlatch. This was a highly complex gathering hosted in a massive, specially built plank house. But here's the fascinating part. The chief didn't show off his status by hoarding his wealth. He showed off by giving it away. He'd distribute incredibly elaborate gifts to his guests. Sometimes they'd even engage in pure, conspicuous consumption, literally burning valuable goods or tossing them into the ocean, just to say, look how unbelievably wealthy I am, I don't even need this. It was the ultimate flex of prestige.
And the potlatch was the glue holding the entire culture together. Basically, any major life event triggered one. Confirming a new chief? Potlatch. Coming of age, tattoos, piercings, secret society initiations? Potlatch. Marriages, funerals, winning a battle? You guessed it! It was how the community celebrated, governed, and most importantly, redistributed wealth.
All this wealth and leisure time also fueled some of the most spectacular art in human history. But those incredible totem poles and massive big houses weren't just pretty decorations. They were legal and historical documents. A crest on a totem pole was a visual record of a family's ancient lineage, their property rights, their birthplaces, and their connection to the supernatural. It was quite literally their identity, carved into cedar.
Let's look at Section 5, Colonization and Resilience. Epidemics to Modern Revival.
We absolutely have to talk about the devastating impact of European and American contact. When explorers and traders arrived, they brought over old-world infectious diseases like smallpox that the native populations had zero immunity to. The result was just catastrophic. It's estimated that these epidemics wiped out as much as 90% of the local populations. 90%! It's a heartbreaking loss of life that ultimately paved the way for settlers to colonize the Pacific Northwest.
History shows us this happened through multiple tragic waves. You had an outbreak starting around the Kamchatka Peninsula in 1769, sweeping down through Alaska. Then, Spanish expeditions in the 1770s sparked outbreaks wherever they anchored. By 1781, the disease spread from central Mexico right up to the Columbia River, and the brutal irony here is that the very same ancient, intricate trade networks that had made these tribes so wealthy actually helped the diseases spread like wildfire.
But, and this is absolutely crucial to understand, the story does not end there. The resilience of these nations is nothing short of incredible. Colonial governments, through laws like the Canadian Indian Act, literally tried to outlaw their culture, enforcing a ban on the potlatch that lasted for decades. But the people kept it alive underground. When the ban was finally dropped in 1951, all those suppressed ceremonies came roaring back. Today, there are massive efforts to repatriate stolen sacred masks, and these indigenous communities are growing, they're young, and they are fiercely reclaiming their heritage.
To bring this explainer full circle back to the water, one of the coolest things happening right now is the revival of the ocean-going cedar canoes. It kicked off in the late 1980s with the Haida and Haltsig nations and just exploded. Today, there are these massive events called tribal canoe journeys. Communities from all up and down the coast reconnect, honoring the earth and their ancestors, and navigating the exact same waters their people have paddled since time immemorial. It is absolutely beautiful to see.
So, I want to leave you with this final thought. The Salmon people built incredibly complex societies, created monumental art, and managed vast forest gardens and fisheries for 10,000 years, entirely without destroying the very ecosystems they relied on. As we look around at our own global environmental crises today, what can we learn from that kind of enduring wisdom? What can modern society take away from the true masters of the Pacific Northwest coast? Think about that. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.